How many expect to travel abroad in the next 5 years? In Latin America, 69%. Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, Chile as well. It's about 2 out of 3 in Spain that we vote, and about 2 out of 3 in the United States as well. To put that into context, I get this question all the time. So what really makes this group different? And all right, big deal. Here they are in their 20s. What happens when they move into their 30s and 40s? Do they become more conservative? Do they become more bound to family and to community? I can't predict the future or make that kind of projection. What I do know is that there are 2 things that make an age cohort. One is what we call the life cycle. 20-somethings are always 20-somethings. They care about how they look, their relationship, their career, things that are deeply personal and intimate. By the same token, the other thing that makes an age cohort is the external event that dominates that period in which they reach maturity. Just as I know, anecdotally, that 20-somethings were 20-somethings in the United States up until December 6, 1941, and 2 days later they became America's greatest generation. And the same can be said for 20-somethings in the 30s and in the 40s here in Europe. This group of 20-somethings is growing up in a world that is shrinking, in a world that is truly a global village, in a world of connectivity and growing connectivity, and is likely, despite moving into their 30s and 40s and fixing their relationships and building their careers, this is a group that will always have a planetary sensibility and will be geographically mobile. And it only makes me wonder about the next group of 20-somethings. I don't think I can even begin to fathom how mobile that group will be. This is a worldwide study that was commissioned by IBM. And what it said was that by the age of 30, our 20-somethings today will have had 4 different jobs. By the age of 40, 10 different jobs. Now, as I was growing up, that's how we defined loser. But it is so different right now. It is very different right now. What it means is, in the negative, a rootlessness, but in the positive, a willingness. I just think it is so exciting, and it has so many implications. And I'm going to leave it at there because this is the kind of group that I would really like to exchange ideas with and hear your reactions. I must tell you, those who've liked my book have called me an optimist. And those very few who've disliked my book have called me an optimist. I did not set out, when I started thinking about this book in the late 90s, I did not start out writing an optimistic book. I was thinking that I was writing a book about how tens of millions of Americans were giving up on the dream. And instead, what I discovered is not only a resilience, but really a sense that on one hand, Americans were readjusting their expectations for their lives, but on the other hand, providing incredible opportunities for their children. And in those opportunities, we have created our first global citizens. It's going to be exciting to watch. Thank you very much. Yes, no.
John, you mentioned that this generation have kind of discovered Barack Obama 2.5 years ago? Was it even before he declared his candidacy for presidency?
It really was. It was, and a lot of it had to do with technology. As you know, he gave the keynote speech at the Democratic Convention in 2004. Interesting story. In 2000, he could not get credentials to get inside the convention hall at the Democratic Convention. In 2004, he was giving the keynote address. In 2008, he was accepting the nomination. So it's quite a story. But that was a YouTube phenomenon in 2004. And who dominated YouTube, obviously, were young people. Barack Obama captivated that generation. You know, I'm asked all the time, is he a baby boomer because he was born in 1961? No. Is he a Generation X, or I call the Nike generation? No. He's really our first global president and candidate. He transcends one culture. He's lived on 4 continents. He has a worldview that our young people share. The timing was perfect. And they energized each other. The candidate energized young people very early and used the technology better than I've ever seen anyone use the technology in a political campaign. He energized them and they energized him. And frankly, when Americans told us we want change, a lot of it was driven by young people. And there was no way Bush, Clinton could be interpreted as change.
I want to pick up the thread on politics for a second. What do you see as the change on the global political scene as a result of this global citizen that we're seeing come up around the world? Do you predict a federal Europe? How do you see the change politically? How does that impact that?
You know, it's interesting. I studied under the Jesuits, and I always remember Father Cantillon, my sophomore theology professor, saying, God writes straight with crooked lines. I never forgot that. That path will continue. That path towards globalization, although that's become such a bad word to many people. That path towards consolidation, that path towards, just as the United States and much of Europe emerged from the Great Depression and World War II with tighter national regulations, this is now following this Great Recession. We will develop global structures for regulation. It's an economic path that needs to be taken, but it is also a planetary sensibility that is developing. Young people are, you know the group Doctors Without Borders? These are people without borders, and will become people without borders even more so. Now there are crooked lines. There is a development of Chinese nationalism among young people that could strengthen. There is perhaps a very serious development of Russian nationalism among young Russians. So you'll have this tension, but the economic imperatives, the need to create structures to ensure that this sort of interruption doesn't take place again, or at least doesn't take place as dramatically as it's taking place now, will make those structures